and our demand for a quality of life that befits us as a community and that befits actually that we require and request for everyone. Well, I'm pleased to have community people here to talk about this proposition. Over the weekend, my friend and colleague Tommy Beavis is the owner of the well-known Pimento restaurant on East Street, on Lake Street in South Minneapolis, not Lake Street, but Nicollet Avenue, Nicollet and 26th in South Minneapolis. They call it East Street, I believe. Hosted an event which was a wonderful idea, bringing community leaders together in tables and circles to talk about the challenges that are made evident by both COVID-19 and the violence that our community and the world witnessed in the murder of George Floyd. Uh, our community is hurting still, and it's obvious by the reporting that we see on TV every day that the country is feeling this pain and is demanding change. And obviously, the spark here is a spark that's changing or causing a change throughout the world. Tommy Beavis, talk about the event you held at the Pimento restaurant on Saturday, I believe, over the past 2 Saturdays.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the work that you are continuously doing.
Lean into your microphone. Lean into your microphone.
Leaning into the microphone. How's the audio? Good, wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for all that you're doing, and thank you so much for all that you continue to do through your various media channels. This message, it has to go out there to the world. Minneapolis is ground zero for this revolution, and we need to be able to have the archivists and the storytellers capture it and share it with the world, and also share it for posterity. So thank you for what you're doing. You also forgot to mention you're also a fellow compatriot, a Jamaican as well.
We're Jamaican, that's right.
So thank you so much for all of that. Pimento has had to be sort of like that community safe space, because as Jamaicans, that's who we are. You're used to that, creating that safe space where no matter what side of the political divide you're from, you come home, we relax, we break bread together, we address the serious critical issues within our community of the day, and we brainstorm. And so we, since COVID, we've ensured that we remain open because our community needs food. We only closed on Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday, and we ensured that we were there for the community, making donations throughout that. But then fast forward, after the George Floyd incident happened, Pimento has traditionally been involved in these efforts, but from the behind the scenes. We've been very cautious, like, well, let's try to figure out how we can help influence from behind the scenes. But it's kind of pointless to try to protect our brand if we can't protect our people. And by people, we're talking about our community, we're talking about our guests, we're talking our employees, and we're talking about myself. And so it's pointless to be protecting property and not people. And so we decided that we were going to be involved as it makes sense, because we have unique skills and all, we bring that to the table. And so what we wanted to do was sort of like use Pimento as a space to bring community together to talk and figure things out. But we recognize that there was so much pain and hurt and hunger, quite honestly, in our community. And so one of our employees, Scott McDonald, as well as his friends who have been on the ground with the grassroots efforts, saw that, the supermarkets are burnt down, or the supermarkets are just closed, or because of COVID, nobody has money to go access food. And so we instantly transformed from the restaurant to Pimento Relief Services to ensure that folks can feel comfortable, can donate to the cause. They can donate to those on the front lines without going on the front lines themselves. We would shuttle food to the front lines. We can donate to those in the communities that has been underserved for so long. And we were overwhelmed by the donations, but more importantly, we were appreciative, and at the same time, the community was also appreciative. So on one side of Pimento, you had people coming in with donations. On the other side of Pimento, you had people walking out with donations that they received. And so we knew that the immediate emergency relief was essential, and yet this is a longer term effort. And so we wanted to bring the community together around a Pimento Summit on police homicide, because that's what it is, homicide, police homicide. And how do we get our community leaders together to have that conversation? Before we had our first Pimento Summit, we recognized that we needed to do 2 of them. So the first one, we changed it to make it just be about healing, where the entire community can come out, do yoga in our parking lot, center oneself, and just connect and just feel good as best as one could in this environment. And we had live music, DJs, the whole 9 yards, just to try to bring the community together, like a true peace concert. And then the second one we did was we brought together our city leaders as well as our community leaders together to sit together, break bread, because we know in Minneapolis we have the brain power, the willpower, and the resources to really permanently fix this for the long term. And so that's why we brought them together. And we had an amazing turnout where we had about 100 of the most influential Minnesotans or Minneapolitans at Pimento Backyard addressing some of the serious issues.
Great, great. And so what was the theme at this gathering? What did you do?
So in this gathering, it was first and foremost, get to know each other, start to focus on healing oneself before one can even start talking to another. And then beyond that, it was how do we even start having conversations, open up conversations about police homicide. And so we brought together the community from different communities. So we brought together the civic leaders. So Council Member Jeremiah Ellison was there. Council Vice President Andrea Jenkins was there. Mayor Fry was there. And we had state representatives there as well. But those were the elected officials. We also had elected officials from Brooklyn Park who came out because, again, we can talk. This is not just a Minneapolis issue; it's a regional issue, a national and a global issue. And so they were there. And then we had folks from the business community. So you had the corporate representatives talking about what the corporations can do, what role they can play in this movement. We also had folks from the health and wellness space talking about, well, what role can the wellness community, the health community play in this? Because wellness is something that particularly Black men have been missing out on. They've been doing it their own ways, and it hasn't been working. And so what role can the wellness community play in helping to keep us safe and also to help engage us throughout this time? We also had folks who were represented the religious communities and the various communities. And so at each table, their role was to figure out what can my micro community do to help the larger community in and of itself. And it was powerful to be able to see where the civic leaders and the elected officials, who usually would consider themselves adversaries, sitting down together, working out these issues. And they've already committed to ensuring that we continue this dialogue. It's not a one and done. This is not a drive-by approach. This is just the start of us building the framework for how we're going to work together, how we're going to build trust together, and how we're going to solve this permanently.
Do you see this forum continuing at Pimento? And
yes,
what are the next steps?
We certainly will continue the forum, and it's going to be, in terms of the next steps, right now the city has the content that we're going to be sharing with the media, with the general public as to the outcome of the conversation. And then basically every Saturday going forward, we know that we have to do something. So this Saturday coming, we are looking at hosting another healing session in our parking lot where folks can come out, do more yoga, water balloon fights, DJs, music, those types of things. But we're also honoring Juneteenth. And so we're trying to figure out what role we can play in the general Juneteenth celebration. And we're going to ensure that Minneapolis' Juneteenth or our local Juneteenth efforts here truly starts that conversation and truly starts that trend where we can make Juneteenth a federal holiday. But in terms of the what next, it's how do we bring these same leaders together to continue building trust, to knock out these resolutions together and provide that safe space where they can feel like they're civilians who are working to protect all civilians.
Let me bring Alicia Smith in. Alicia D. Smith is the Executive Director of Corcoran Neighborhood. And Alicia is in Ground Zero over in South Minneapolis. Alicia, how you doing?
I'm all right. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Thank you for joining us again. You've been with us, fairly often, and we appreciate what you're doing and the vision and the voice. Give me an update. What's going on right now? What's on your plate at Corcoran relative to the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and relative to the impact of COVID-19 on the community in general? What's work look like for you right now?
Work looks like life. One continuum after another, because I live in the neighborhood, in the community. And so spending a lot of time talking to neighbors, talking to other leaders here in South Minneapolis. Just yesterday, Pastor Carmen and myself, along with a couple of other local organizations, led a BIPOC women's march had, 2,000, 3,000 mothers, a mother's march out. And we marched from the former site of the third precinct over to the George Floyd Memorial over on 38th in Chicago, and just spoke about sort of what we see. In particular, it's Black mothers, Black women, um, and those folks and us folks being out on the front line, really leading, and how we sort of got to reclaim our community. We got to reclaim the Black family, um, not only as executive directors who happen to be Black women, um, but also Black women who happen to be executive directors in these neighborhoods where there are so far and few between of us, out of the 70 plus neighborhood organizations. And so, with us being in ground zero, it's really important not only to strategize, but also get a pulse of what the community is feeling. There's a lot of uneasiness, there's a lot of concerns around safety, around sustainability, around the instant food desert that we have become. And what does that look like long term? Right now, you have a lot of folks that are excited to help and want to be out here. But long term, we have to plan, we have to strategize. What does it look like 2 weeks from now when the cameras completely disappear, right? When this is no longer the new thing and everybody has paid attention to the fact that the world is opened up. So how do we come back and have these conversations with our community, um, on top of the fact that we're battling COVID-19, which is sort of this, it's really a silent killer at this point, right? Because the world is open, we're grieving, we're weeping, and we're struggling as a people to figure out what do we do to move forward. And so there have been several free testing sites to pop up here. Essex Bethany is a huge one. And so we've been encouraging folks who've been out, either at the memorial site or even involved in some of the protests, to make sure that they get tested when they find the time. Because the reality of it is that you can't tell folks to not come out and protest. That's not going to happen. And so how do we keep people safe? We're handing out masks. We're, trying to keep sanitation stations open here on ground zero, and just making sure that we have a plethora of resources for community that now sort of finds itself in a crisis for a multitude of reasons. One, from the lynching of our brother George Floyd, and then from the uprising that followed, which put a gaping hole in folks being able to access their basic needs. And so we're trying to make sure that we're doing kind of all encompassing boots on the ground community service, and community investment in partnership with community.
Denisha Goins represents the Cleveland neighborhood in North Minneapolis. Denisha, but you're a native North Sider. You know this community. And I'd like to just get your sense on how North Side, North Minneapolis has responded to both things. One, the most recent and the most pressing, at least in terms of how recently it happened, the murder of George Floyd. But put that in the context of how our community has articulated its feelings around the death of Philando Castile and the death of Jamar Clark and others that have gone on here. And then obviously that in the context of the COVID-19 virus and its impact on our community, on businesses, the shutdown. What are your feelings? What are your thoughts? And how do you see these challenges being expressed in your neighborhood and in your own personal life?
Well, I mean, some of the challenges that I know that some of us face, like I had said before we started, like I was born and raised, on the north side, North Minneapolis. I mean, we never moved too far, it's just, a block away from the other. And it's like, growing up, walking to, these stores and, meeting these owners and the employees there, it's kind of like, everything is so tight netted. And I think the majority of us, not, everybody, we took that very hard and we took that very serious. And it's like, what is this generation going to do? Generations before us, they've started that path, they did the hard part, all we have to do is carry the torch. And I feel like that's what most of us good ones have done. I mean, even down to me personally, like I've marched, I've prayed, I've conducted cleanups, like I've made sandwiches, for protesters, wandering around, just giving out, bottles of water, and milk just in case, and different, first aid kits, making that and passing those out, just trying to help one another and we have to keep everything together.
Mhm.
I mean, if won't nobody else, take care of our city and love it, who will? It's up to the people. It's kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of scary because living in this day and age and what happened to Mr. Floyd, it's kind of like those were the stories that my grandparents would tell us. Like this is what happened, when we were your age and we were adults and you guys weren't even thought of. And it's like, this is something that, us Black people, we are still going through this. We are still living through this. Like we are living proof. It's not, something that was did in the past. Like it's currently happening. But I think when everybody stepped up and came together the way that they did, we really pulled it together. Everybody, I can thank everyone for that, for coming out and just showing their respects and like I said, praying together and being together and holding each other up. I mean, that's pretty much what it's all about. It's something that I always kind of wanted to do, getting into community engagement and being that voice, for the young Black community. We really need more people like this. And when you called, I was kind of happy that you asked me to join, because it's like, yes, this is something that that I've been wanting to do. Like I want to, get higher in the status that I am, so I can teach those that are younger than me, teach those that look up to me, just being a leader and being that prime example that we can do this. If we can stick together, we can do this. And as for COVID, I mean,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
And COVID strikes triple. I mean, for me, I mean, I have elderly grandparents, and a mother who works in healthcare. I'm a retired CNA as well. And it's like when COVID happened, it hit everybody too. It was just, like a massive sickness that just poured in. So it's kind of like, working from home and then homeschooling my daughter. And then it's like, well, what about, what am I going to do with my community with that? So I just felt like now was the time that I just stepped up and stepped out. So I've been doing cleanups on a personal level and for Cleveland Neighborhood Association, especially after the riots and stuff that happened that carried over to the north side. A bunch of us got together and we helped our businesses, cleaned up our areas and, boarded up our businesses and our stores and stuff, and made sure, that our business owners, and not even them, that our neighbors are okay. We have a population of mostly families and elderly in the Cleveland community. So those, them there were my core ones to step up and help first. So I've pretty much just I do weekly check-ins with all of my seniors. If not once a week, I try to hit them at least twice a week with just a simple conversation, for the ones that can't get out, and scared to get out because of COVID. So I've did a couple grocery store runs for a few and, retrieve medicine. And I'm currently now in the process of trying to find a higher organization to donate more goods. I want to start doing a drop off for my seniors. So get them, some perishables, some essential products, that they need, and make them a care package. And then once I take care of my seniors, then I want to start working towards those families, and mostly the low income families, because most of them, where we're centered at Cleveland, I'm connected to Lucy Laney, the school on Penn Avenue. So, and that's the school my daughter currently goes to. So we want to, get those families and stuff taken care of, and then, branch off and hopefully, connect with other neighborhood organizations and different people, from the community to to really help us get that boost so we can get ourselves as a whole and as a community back on track.
You mentioned again that you're born and raised in North Minneapolis, and I wanted you and Alicia to both talk about this sense of community that you, I think, so beautifully just described. You talk about it being, the elders in the neighborhood and the neighbors, and it being personal because your family, your mom and your grandparents, all of those are, you say in one breath, reflecting the connectivity between the generations and the geography of around your neighborhood. Talk about what is the geography of Cleveland neighborhood. And Alicia, if you would take a minute, describe the geography of Corcoran neighborhood and how both of those neighborhoods sort of form a wider community with other neighborhood associations. Denisha, first describe your Cleveland neighborhood.
Well, I kind of consider us a little family because it's, Cleveland neighborhood isn't that large, but it's kind of like everyone already knows each other. It's a dynamic of people of color. We do have some Latina families in Cleveland, a couple of Somali. We do have our white relatives in Cleveland as well. And it's kind of like, we see no color. If there's an issue that we have going on, we have a neighborhood watch, community safety. So we try to do monthly patrol walks, to areas of call, and then sometimes to just, take a spew. It's kind of like we started policing ourselves a little bit way before people wanted to police themselves. Mm-hmm. We kind of got that kicked off a couple of years ago. And it's kind of like the different neighborhood organizations, like even though we aren't so close, it's kind of like we are close because the people that work within the heart of those communities can come together to make things better.
Let me break in a second. I see Jeremiah Ellison has been able to join the call. Jeremiah, I don't see your video yet, but I see that you're in the room. Thank you. There you are. Jeremiah, we're just talking about our experiences and our expressions for community. You represent the 5th Ward, North Minneapolis, and I was asking Denisha to talk about Cleveland neighborhood. Not in your ward, I don't think. Cleveland, you're up in the 4th Ward, I think, Denisha. But Jeremiah, would you talk about 5th Ward and talk about the impact, particularly of the rebellion that erupted after the murder of George Floyd? Talk about that, first of all. Secondly, talk about the ongoing demand and movement and call for justice in our community, where that stands right now, citywide, but also particularly about North Minneapolis. And finally, talk about COVID-19, the impact that is having on top of, or how the unrest has an impact on the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all experiencing as well. So thank you for being here, Council Member Jeremiah Ellison.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Al. And, I'm going to try to keep it short because as I was listening to Denisha speak, I thought, North Minneapolis might be broken into 2 wards, wards 4 and 5. But all my constituents, and I know all of Philippe's constituents, they just think of North Minneapolis as one thing. And as somebody who's born and raised here, I can attest to the fact that we view North Minneapolis as one community. I think that we're going to be in a state of recovery for a while because I think of coronavirus and then the recent rebellions that we've seen. One of the things that really hit a lot of businesses on the north side, a lot of Black-owned, a lot of immigrant-owned businesses on the north side, were a series of fires that transpired over a few nights. For those that aren't aware, while North Minneapolis is not shy about our demand for justice, and the north side has never been shy about protesting, you didn't see the marching in the streets. You didn't see that kind of gathering happening over north. A lot of those things were stayed over south, and yet you still sort of had these, in my mind, strategic fires happening in an otherwise quiet neighborhood for those 2 days. Again, most of the businesses being Black or immigrant-owned businesses along mostly our major corridors. And so I think that there's going to be some recovery in order, and I think that you've got a lot of businesses that I don't want it to take 10 years, 20 years for us to see people recover their businesses. And I know that the community is rallying behind a number of businesses. The Fade Factory, I think, has had an increasingly successful, they're the barbershop that burned down. They've had an increasingly successful fundraising campaign, but I'm going to continue to make sure that all the businesses, even the ones who have successful fundraising campaigns, get all the assistance that they need. I think we're entitled to that as a community under such unique circumstances. The demand for justice, I think, is heard. It's felt. We're having this conversation at the city about what our emergency response system needs to look like if this one has continued to fail us. And in my opinion, I think it has. Folks will remember the protest at the 4th Precinct 5 years ago around the killing of Jamar Clark. And justice was especially in the criminal court system, eluded us that time, and I'm hoping that will not be the case this time. I'm confident that won't be the case this time. But I think we got to continue to push. I think the community has to continue to push and say, hey, look, we're not going to not be at the table as we're discussing this new form of emergency response. We do need an emergency response that doesn't kill people. We need an emergency response that doesn't react with brutality. But we also need to be at the table as we're creating something new. And I think the North Side will continue to make that demand. Lastly, coronavirus is still very real. It's still going on. I've seen, I get that folks are tired of being pent up in the house. I've seen a number of folks out who are not wearing masks. I'm still wearing a mask whenever I'm out. I hope everybody on the call does. To remind folks how real this is, we've talked to how I already lost my grandmother because of coronavirus. But just less than a week ago, another friend of mine, Marnie Xiong, who was an elected official on the other side of the river in St. Paul, she herself contracted coronavirus, fought a hard-fought battle, but ultimately succumbed to the virus and passed away. Marnie was an incredible leader, and was only 31 years old. And I think that, that should remind us that this whole notion that it's just older folks who are affected, or any concept that we're affected, people should put that out of their minds, because we're still dealing with it, and we're still losing people because of this virus. And so I want us to continue to take it seriously. I want folks to continue to take precautions, keep themselves safe. Again, when we talk about the recovery that's needed both in South and North, it's not just because of the protest, but it's also because of a month before this protest or more, businesses were having to shut down due to the virus. And so we've got to make sure that we don't leave our entrepreneurs, our small businesses completely hanging, as we try to recover from both coronavirus and the unrest. So I'll leave it there. And if folks have other questions, I'm happy to answer.
I've got a couple of follow-up, Jeremiah. One is that it seems to me the challenges we have simply illustrate the gravity and the historicity of the inequity that our communities have faced. And that now we have discovered an opportunity to bring voice to not only the things that are happening right now and continue to happen, but to put these in the context of a historical injustice to our people. And to do that, not just for the sake of naming, but for the sake of changing. So I'm saying that Insight News is saying that we should be talking about a massive investment in North Minneapolis, in Broadway and beyond. And I don't think it's inappropriate to say that we probably need $1 billion of investment to not only restore restoring businesses that were damaged or marginalized by COVID or by the unrest is not enough. Simply not enough.
You're right.
Restore to what? The ongoing misery you had before? Absolutely not.
Right.
Now is the time to create transformation that is real and sustainable. I'm saying that we need to call for $1 billion investment in North Minneapolis around West Broadway. I think we should have $1 billion of investment in South Minneapolis to take care of all of those businesses on Lake Street, 38th Street, 48th, 46th Street, Nicollet Avenue that have been challenged, particularly investment targeting businesses owned by Black or African American, African immigrants, Latinos, Native American, Asian brothers and sisters, and also white brothers and sisters who live in our community, who can say, like I can say, this is my community. They are part of my community and I am part of theirs. And $1 billion for University Avenue, targeting Black, Asian, Latino, Native American, immigrant, other marginalized communities, and our white brothers and sisters. You know, one of the things that that Denisha said that was wonderful was she, in explaining the demographics of Cleveland, said our white relatives. I haven't heard that said the way you just said it so casually, but it's simply true. Denisha, it's simply true. And you just said it the way it really is, and that's the truth of the matter. So our community is not anti, our community is inclusive, and I think we want everybody to do well, and be successful. And so I think that kind of call is both timely and appropriate. But respond to that, if you would, Council Member, and then also talk about the question of defunding the police. What does that mean? It's a hot topic, nationwide, worldwide, and I think we just need to put some definitions around it so people know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, first off, you know, I won't pretend to know exactly what the dollar figure is that's required to, like you said, not only repair the damage that's been done, but to bring us up to the full potential of our corridors that our neighborhoods deserve. But, you know, I think that your call is correct, that we don't need to just replace the handful of businesses that we've lost, or buildings that we lost. We deserve an immense infusion of capital to support sort of the vibrancy, the brilliance of our communities, because we have been denied that for decades, for several generations. We've been denied that. Not that we haven't been able. It's not that we haven't been able to figure it out. It's that we've been denied. And so I think that is, I think that's absolutely correct. Absolutely the right way to think about this. I know that I'll be fighting for that. I do have to thank, Senator Bobby Joe Champion and others who have had folks from the state, all around the state, coming down to West Broadway. I've met up with them twice to have folks from around the state, elected officials from around the state, come and see the corridor, see what we're dealing with here, so that they can understand why we need state support. The city's going to continue to do its part. I know that there were a couple of tools. You know, I was working hard with the mayor and Councilmember Cunningham to create a financial tool that was going to help businesses buy their buildings. The status of that is, of course, in flux because we have this budget issue, but it was going to be one of the first tools that the city's ever had to help, to help small businesses buy their buildings. We need to still be thinking in that vein, even as we pursue forward. And once we sort of get our budgeting in order, we need to make sure that we maintain that as a priority. But so that is incredibly important. I think you're thinking about it the exact right way. And I think that people need to be advocating to the city council, but to the state and elsewhere to put more investment here. The last thing I'll say about that is in the coming weeks, Ilhan Omar's office has reached out to me and to our state delegation here to get a tour going for other congresspeople from around the country to talk about a federal aid package and and making sure that when that comes to Minneapolis, it doesn't all just sort of get dumped over south, but that we are getting real investment here on the north side. So always have to give my big ups to our congresswoman for working with us to coordinate that. So defund the police is about completely reimagining how we deal with emergencies in our city. Right now, and I get that the slogan is maybe provocative, and you're right, it does require some definition, but it challenges us to completely rethink how we do emergency response in our cities. And you might ask, well, why do we have to completely reimagine it? Why can't we just sort of keep tinkering here and there? Isn't the system sort of good enough mostly, and then we sort of have these glitches every once in a while? Well, first, I would say that people getting killed by the police is a pretty big glitch in your program, especially if it's happening regularly, right? In the last 5 years, we've had well over 5 police shootings, but we've had 3 incredibly high-profile ones with Jamar Clark, Philando Castile. I know that wasn't technically Minneapolis police, but it's the metro area, and now George Floyd. This can't keep happening, right? It's too big of a glitch for us to just plug it into the cost-benefit analysis and say, well, it's mostly good if not for these incidences. So people dying is a pretty big glitch. The second thing I would say is that there are all kinds of problems with our department that fall well short of people being killed by the police, right? Folks might remember that that less than 2 years ago, our department was under investigation because we had officers illegally directing EMTs to inject people with ketamine. And there was videos of people begging to not be injected as they were injected, simply for like talking back or mouthing off, right? That's to me, that's a form of torture. And so I think that that's incredibly problematic. People might also remember that the Star Tribune broke a story talking about our complete and utter failure to address sexual assault crimes in the city of Minneapolis. One of the questions I've gotten is, well, who's going to address sexual assault and rape cases? And I had to, sadly break it to people and say, we don't do that now, right? And if people expect to be kept safe in our city that way, then we've got to design a system that keeps people safe in that way. The last thing I'll say is that about defund the police is what's funny is that there were some people at the city, at the staff level, and a few council members, I suppose, as well, that must have been a little prophetic, because we were already starting down this path a year ago. We were examining our 911 calls and asking the question, how many of these actually need an armed use of force response? We have a lot of 911 calls that end up we have a lot of 911 calls that are for emotionally disturbed persons. I think about the George Floyd case where he was, all of that was over a supposed fake $20 bill. Did we need force in that situation? We certainly didn't need a gun. And so we were already examining those things. I think that this situation has forced us to be aggressive about addressing those situations and finding a new path to address those situations. Cops will tell you they're not social workers. They're not childhood development experts. They're not medical professionals. But we fund police and we underfund those things. So why don't we just take our time to understand what it means to fully fund those things, as well as our other emergency response that might need to be armed or whatever. But we can't fund one at the expense of all these other programs.
So it's not an either or.
It doesn't have to be an either or. I do think that if the institution of policing, when we think about the unions and the federations and all that, refuses to take accountability for the murders, for officers that behave badly. Remember, it is incredibly difficult to fire a problematic officer. It is nearly impossible to prosecute them for anything short of murder. And so, I had this situation the other day where I was trying to look up the officer Daniel Holtzclaw, which, if people remember, Daniel Holtzclaw was using his position to commit a series of serial sexual assaults as a police officer. The thing was, I couldn't remember his name, so I Googled, police officer sexual assault, and I found a whole list of officers before I ever even found Daniel Holtzclaw. I almost didn't find the guy because there were so many officers who fit that bill. And so I do think that we've also, it doesn't have to be either or, but we do have to address the system of policing as well, because these federations make it really impossible for us to hold police accountable. And we've got to be in a position to hold anyone who's armed, anyone who has permission by the citizens of the residents of any given city. We give them permission to kill people if they think it's necessary. With that incredible amount of trust, there needs to be an incredible amount of accountability when they break that trust.
7 or 8, I think, officers today said they are resigning. I don't have the details. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard the same thing. I don't have the details, not more than people might have read in the newspaper.
Al, if I could have a couple of follow-up questions to the councilman.
Tommy Beavis, go ahead. Yeah, just bring your mic up. Give me your best microphone.
All right, I'm giving you my best microphone voice.
Jeremiah, if you have to leave, we thank you.
Well, it's actually
I could stay on for another quick minute.
Okay, cool.
All right,
Go
I
ahead,
have a quick
Tommy.
question for you, Councilman. First of all, thank you for coming out Saturday to Pimento, where we had that wonderful summit. At that discussion, one of the big part of what we're talking about was what you touched on, which is ensuring that a lot of these spaces that were burnt out, they're replaced by the business owners that are there. But also, it's no longer about just making them tenants, but it's about making them property owners. Therefore, they can go to the bank and use their assets to get the necessary resources to grow their business. Could you elaborate on what you're saying? And for the record, we're having this conversation not only with the local community, but we're also having this conversation at the national level to figure out how can we get those national resources within our city to help us, figure out how much all that property would be, and what it will take to get the necessary funds here locally to do so. Could you elaborate on what you said by things are stalled and what do we need to do to rejuvenate it? Secondly, as it relates to the police defunding issues, we see that the city council and the mayor have sort of like two divergent paths. How are you what do we as a community need to do? What do you as our elected officials need to do to bring those divergent paths together so we're one stampeding buffalo heading in the same direction?
Yeah. No, those are great questions. So first off, I'll say that when it comes to, when I say things are stalled, I simply mean that because of our budget shortfall with coronavirus, the city might end up having about $200 million less than we thought we would have, meaning that we've got to now cut about $200 million out of our budget, or else we'll overspend and we could potentially bankrupt the city. And so, last year, the mayor and I and a number of council members got to designing what we were calling the Commercial Property Development Fund. It was a fund designed to do exactly what we're talking about, help businesses buy their buildings in a way that was financially, didn't leave businesses financially overstretched, right? And so as we go through the budgeting process, I'm going to keep it a priority to make sure that we maintain that fund and that we don't abandon it just because we need to because we need to make some hard decisions. But as of right now, we haven't had that difficult conversation yet. And so I don't want to make any promises about my ability to hold that fund until after I've successfully held it there and I can let the community know, hey, we have maintained this fund. We are still good to go. Let's keep working on this and getting those businesses underway. As far as what the community can do to make sure, just say, I think calling your council member or the mayor and saying, hey, we need we need to make sure that we maintain, we need to make sure that we maintain that fund, the Commercial Property Development Fund. We need to make sure that we prioritize small business owners owning their buildings. I think making that demand of your city council member and the mayor is really important and will go a long way in our ability to maintain that fund as we make all these difficult budget decisions.
As it relates to the fund, real quickly though, remember that the SBA does have funding available for business owners who are tenants who want to buy their property. Also, separately, if we declare this as a disaster, we can also activate a lot of federal funding. So even if the city has a $200 million shortfall, we still have the resources available.
Absolutely. What I'm talking about is one fund at the city level, but you're absolutely correct. we are going to have a whole lot of resources, I think, from the state and federal level that we are going to absolutely tap into. We are not going to leave small businesses hanging at all, and we're not going to abandon our commitment to making sure that we get small businesses owning their buildings at all. It's
and we can't wait for the gentrifying vultures to jump in and
no, you're right. This situation, unfortunately, situations like this, they open up that lane, right, for folks to say, oh, you know what? Here are a couple of parcels. Building burned down here. Now all of a sudden it's cheap. Everybody's scared. I'm just going to buy it. I'm going to buy it at bottom dollar and just sit on it for a decade until
30 years, 40 years.
Right. So it's so you're absolutely right. We cannot allow that to happen either.
Let me bring James Trice in. James, thank you for being patient and monitoring. But from a public policy project perspective,
I do got to get going.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Tommy, thank you so much.
Big up, big up.
Thank you. And we'll get you back. We're doing this 5 days a week. So as often as you're available, we want you on.
Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. James Trice, thank you for being patient. Bring your voice into the conversation, sort of summarizing what you've heard already and what our community's response continues to be and can become in search of building effective public policy, public opportunity for our community.
Well, thank you very much, Al, and everyone on the call. Danica, your work that you're doing over in the Cleveland neighborhood, Alicia, your work, Cochrane neighborhood, and of course the work of Jeremiah Ellison, a council member, and all the other work that people are doing is wonderful. It's fantastic. I appreciate it. I support it 100%, and just want to encourage you to continue to do that work. That is the grassroots work. And then also would be remiss if I didn't say thank you, Brother Al, for allowing this platform to take place. Thank you for your just continued history of work, body of work that goes back since even before I moved to Minneapolis in 1990 from the south side of Chicago. So I want to just thank you for all your work that you're doing. Yeah. Let me say this. I mean, I want to hit on one point, right? That there's a lot of talk about defunding the police. And I get it, right? And I'm not, when I first heard defunding the police, my first thought was, okay, what are we going to put in place of it, right? And I get it. I want to defund them. I want something to be done. But let me just say, we have to be very, very clear that this issue is not an issue of training. It's not an issue of funding, right? It's not an issue of just we need better police on the police force, right? There's a lot of talk about there's more good officers than there are bad. 99.9% of the officers are good. Well, then why then do we have the retaliation against good officers when they complain about a bad officer? There's a sister who was terminated from her job. She was a police officer, terminated because she complained about the excessive use of force by a white officer. And she's the one that got fired. I listened to Dave Chappelle's 84.6. I listened to his recent stand-up, and he cites an incident where there was a Black police officer who complained about the issues of a bad officer. He lost his job. So I reject this notion that there's 99.9% of the officers are good. Because here's the issue. Regardless of what we put in place, unless attitudes are changed, unless mindsets are changed about the people that are going to be in place, right? Let's just say we create a citizens council. Well, who sits on that citizens council, right? Who's the makeup of those people? And then what are going to be their attitudes toward Black people? The origin of police officers they were slave chasers. They were ones that went after slaves. The police was formed to police Black folk, but serve and defend white folks. They were created that way. It's in their DNA. It's in the blood. So I know a lot of people talk about reform. I think we need to restructure, right? I think we need to tear the whole damn thing down because the whole mindset is to control Black people. And they have these perceptions, these false narratives, these false stories about Black people. And these narratives, these stories are embedded in the fabric of America. It's woven in. You got some of the Trump administration that they don't see structural racism in the police force. Or you have some police officers say, yeah, there's structural racism in society, but it's not in the police force. That's a lie. You can't have both. You can't say, yeah, police officers are not touched. They're human beings too. They come to the job with biases too, right? And their biases are showed up. And unless we change that, no matter what we do to defund or restructure or reform the police, is going to do anything, because what is going to happen is we're going to have a new thing that's going to result in the same thing that we have going on right now. The still over policing of Black folk, the overrepresentation of Black folks in prison, industrial complex. You're going to still have oppression. You're still going to have some form of brutality. It may not be shooting, but some form. You're going to still have Black people arrested or charged or found guilty of some, over how white people are treated. So we are policed. We're not serviced. We're policed. White communities are service, right? And we just need to get that. I just want people to think about that. Now, I'm not saying don't defund the police, but what I am saying, keep in mind is that, and how whatever that means when they say defund, right? Let's keep in mind that unless you have some attitude changes, you're going to have the same people getting on, and they're going to continue to do the same thing because their minds have not changed. Sensitivity training has not proven to weed out these people. Yeah, they come to their classes, but they still maintain their beliefs. And so I don't want to be cynical here, but I want us to be real. And let's be real about the fact that police were designed to do what it is they're doing. They're doing what they do because this is what they were designed to do. I mean, you think about it, right?
So maybe that's what they mean when they say that 99% of the cops are good. That means they're good at doing what they were designed to do.
Yes, they're good.
Suppression of Black people.
Exactly.
And so they do that in ways that cause us less embarrassment, but keep us feeling that we are secure and that we belong to, or that the world belongs to us.
Yes.
And that our right and our privilege are unassailable, unquestionable, and are well defended. That's one way, a cynical way of looking at it, but maybe closer to the truth.
And it is close to the truth. I mean, let's remind everybody, right? The Dred Scott decision. Justice William Taney, Supreme Court Justice, this is what he said in denying Dred Scott his freedom. He said Blacks are an inferior order. And he said whites have no rights that Blacks are bound to respect. This is what he said, right? This is the judge. When the Declaration of Independence,
Blacks have no right. You said it backwards.
Blacks have no rights that whites are bound to respect. I apologize. Right. Blacks have no rights that whites are bound to respect. So you have this is the notion. This is the ideology that police officers and law enforcement at every level run with. Even if you get Black police officers to get on the force, they're going to swallow that same false ideology that white people's ICE is better than ours. They got to over-police our communities because there's the perception that Black people are monsters, that we're criminals, that we commit most of the crime, and all of that. It's nonsensical. But we got to be real about it. Again, I'm not trying to be cynical, but I want us to be real about it, because what happens is we're going to be right back here again, saying, okay, why come it didn't work? Yeah, they did their training, but why come it didn't happen? Why come things didn't work out? Why come we still have this? When I saw, it was amazing to me that the world saw that this brother his life was taken from him right then before our eyes. Literally, his life, 8 minutes and 46 seconds of his life taken, and people saw that. And so people are marching and protesting, and there's some who are rioting in our streets all over America and the world, and you still have police officers killing us, right?
Like
in the case of
in Atlanta,
Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta, right? You still have them doing the same thing. It's like in the middle of us protesting. Atlanta.
Let me ask Demetria to jump in here. I'll put you on the spot, Demetria. We started off talking about your desire to speak for and to be part of your age group, the youth being responsible, stepping up and standing up. So when you hear this conversation between Al McFarlane and James Trice, what do you think? Because sometimes we hear that younger people get tired of us talking, but what we're telling is the truth that we know. It's a lived truth. And sometimes our young people want to act like we made it up, or it didn't really happen, or that we should get over it. But what we know is that this is something that you can't get over unless you take over your space, your body, your mind, and your future. And up to now, we've been trying. We've not succeeded, but I think we have to redouble our efforts to take over our space, our minds, our culture, our point of view, and to trust ourselves. But what do you think? when you hear this conversation, Denisha Goins?
It's all facts. Everything that he said was 100% facts. I definitely agree with him. The things that I'm hearing from you guys as older leaders, it's quite educational and it's nurturing for me. I mean, I've always been the oddball out of people out of my generation, but yet, some folks still like to listen to me. I generally feel like I am the one in the family with the old soul. So when I say it's educational, my third eye is open. I'm taking that in and I'm soaking it in. And what I try to do when I hear that, when I see that coming from you guys, I try to take that and tell it to my generation in our words. To try to get their eyes, and ears and stuff open, and letting them know, like, we have to wake up. It's not that our ancestors have failed. It's not like our grandparents and our great grandparents have failed. They have opened up a wider path for us, and all we have to do is take the torch and get up. It's all about being educated properly, because you can say that I'm pro-Black and I am all for my culture, but you might not know nothing. What you may know may not be the key that you need to get it together, to make that change and to be that change. And that's why it's like, I have to get myself in here. I have to get myself out there, so people can, not only listen to me, but continue to guide me while you guys are still currently doing it.
Great. Well, we're about out of time. James, are you still there? Yeah. Give me a closing statement. Just thank you so much for walking us through that understanding, that awareness. And I don't know if Alicia's still there or not, but if you're there, Alicia, jump in here too and give me a closing statement. Alicia, because I was going to have you respond to what Denisha was saying before council member came on. So Alicia, just reactions, thoughts, feelings right now, and any announcements you want to make about things you want people to join and support you over at Corcoran. And then we're going to close with James sort of with a summation. Alicia, thank you so much for what you're doing, for your service and your leadership as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's my honor. So I guess in response to the sort of demographics here in the neighborhood we're about 48% white here, and about 23% or so Spanish speaking population. And then there's the rest of us sort of hodgepodge in there. But nonetheless, we are a community who has been damaged, but we will rebuild. I think those are critical things to recognize, is that all of the buildings can be rebuilt. There's insurance. There's been massive amount of fundraising efforts by the West Broadway Coalition and the Lake Street Council to kind of help many of the minority business owners that are among both the North and South Corridor, for those of them that weren't insured. Unfortunately, we know with COVID-19, a lot of these businesses had allowed for their insurance to lapse just to cover paying their personnel. And so, you kind of come out of one battle and you head right into the next, and you don't really even clear the other one. But most importantly, I think that what James was saying is absolutely true. There has to be a reclaiming and a repurpose of many of the systems that claim to serve on our behalf or that claim to protect. And we also got to partner locally with organizations and with community groups that are reflective of the community. Because part of the problem is that, like, if I live in Ramsey, Minnesota, and I've never interacted with communities of color before, hell, you put me in the 4th precinct, it's going to feel a lot like a movie. I'm going to be in modern day warfare in my mind. And so I react as such, and we're not seen sometimes as human beings. And so I think that we have to get past a lot of those things and talk about how do we internally, one, police ourselves, which we know is possible. It's happened time and time again, but we know that the true thing that has to come out of this is that we have to figure out our economic strategy as a people, right? This is a great opportunity, really disgusting circumstances by which things will be birthed, but nonetheless, we have the ability to rebirth and have ownership as Black people, as people of color, for some ownership, for some businesses, provide jobs and opportunities for the people in our communities, for the neighbors on our blocks, you know, for people's kids. I just remember growing up and having business owners that look like my parents give us jobs. And so that's a part of it, economic independence, which is for America is really scary, especially when Black folks wake up and realize that we have that power. And so absolutely, thank you, Mr. Trice, for that education, for that information. And so I think that from here, we just got to remember that we can rebuild. We are resilient people. We've never had an issue being welcoming to others. I think that may be part of why we are taken advantage of, is that because we are so forgiving and so welcoming and so inclusive that we tend to neglect ourselves and say, before I can build your house up strong, let me make sure we're solid here, and then we'll come over and help build you up. And so that's what I would say. Thank you so much. James Trice, give me a summation, if you would, about a minute, 2 minutes.
Well, let me just say, Alicia, you right on point, sister. I mean, I think what you said in the ending is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We are Blacknificent people. I'm gonna repeat that. We are a Blacknificent people. I would not want to be anything else but Black. No matter what we've been through, I would not want to be anyone else but Black. I'm serious. And we have been welcoming. We have opened our doors. We've been, in some regards, too patient with the system, right? We've been too welcoming of others and allow them to come into our space. But that's our nature. Our nature, we are a people. We believe in the collective us, the we, the us, the R, right? Not the me, the my, the I. You know, that's Eurocentric thinking. And let me just say this, right? And I'm gonna close with this, right? And this is what great Ella Baker said. She said, until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, becomes as important to the world, rest of the country, as the killing of white mothers' sons, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. And that is the deal. We got to force them to see our humanity. We have to see our own humanity. We're going to get through this. And I believe this time is something is different about this spirit that's in the air right now. But you see, we're coming together. I mean, when I watch the George Floyd service here in Minneapolis at North Central University I actually went to, our mater, matter of fact, that the people were singing and they were dancing and they were like, wow, how is this possible? Because that's the kind of people we are. We're going to get through this. We need to be vigilant. We need to be mindful. We need to educate ourselves. We need to not be deceived, not swallow the Kool-Aid. And we need to hold our elected officials accountable. We need to vote in every single election. Know who you're voting for and why you're voting for that individual. We need to not trust the okie doke on it all the time. We just need to keep our head up and keep our ears open, our eyes open, keep educating ourselves. Understand that we're not a monolith, but can we come together, even though we have differences of opinion about how things should be done, and look at what our values are? What do we hold true? What do we as a people hold true? If we come together based on our values, not on our position, I think a lot more can happen. So thank you, Al. Alicia, thank you for your great work. I've been knowing you for years. And so keep doing what you do. And we should talk sometime. And Danica, thank you for the work you're doing over there. I remember running Jordan Area Community Council some years ago, executive director of Jordan Area Community Council. And so I know the work that you're facing. So continue to do that. Both young sisters, I commend you, and whatever you need from me, reach out, and however I can support you, I'm cool. I'll be there.
Thanks to all of you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And again, not congratulations, but continued success, and just praise and applause from me, from Insight News. And on behalf of our community, you all are doing the right thing and doing it righteously. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. If you enjoyed this kind of conversation, please like it, please share it. We'll be doing this every day, different times of the day, but typically at 1 o'clock tomorrow, in conjunction with the live broadcast of Conversations with Al McFarlane on KFAI, but also Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Friday, we talk with Black physicians about mental health, about physical health, about the stress of the pandemic, the stress of the quest for justice by Black people in our community and in this country. Later today, I think about half an hour, we're going to do another Zoom Facebook Live talking about health. So come back in about half an hour. Otherwise, we'll see you later. My guests, thank you all so much. Keep up the good work. I appreciate you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.